From Fox 8 Sports, this is the Overtime Podcast.
From the Fox 8 studios in New Orleans, this is the Fox 8 Overtime Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Fazende, riding shotgun as he does each and every podcast. This is Andre Johnson.
Junior.
Do not forget the Junior. It's very important to remember the JR at the end of the name. Before we get into today's content, be sure to like, share, rate, review. If you are watching us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, get the bell notification for when we drop that fire content. Also, hello to the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network. Glad you have found us here as it airs throughout the week on this beautiful network here we have at Fox 8 called the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network. It is Wednesday, hump day in the city of New Orleans, but there's been some information that has come out up in Indianapolis, and I told y'all this is going to happen once the combine gets here. We're not there, unfortunately, but we are reading the reports from Indianapolis, and some big news has come out. But before we get to that, how are you feeling?
I'm feeling good. You know, it's warm again. I have this jacket on, but that's because it can be cold in the office sometimes.
Yeah.
We got nice short sleeve weather outside. I'm feeling good.
It really does feel good, and it looks like parade weather is going to be nice this weekend. So for those attending, there's nothing better than like a sunny Mardi Gras. You're outside all day and night, and it's a good time when you got good weather for Mardi Gras. So as Mardi Gras gets, if it's a late Mardi Gras, which this year it is, obviously, you have a better chance of good weather for Mardi Gras. Okay, so if y'all are doing that this weekend, have fun, enjoy, and live it up. But as for us here today on this Wednesday, we have news on the Saints quarterback situation. We have been talking about the options the Saints had on the table, realistic options when it came to one Derek Carr. And it looks like we finally have an answer. Please continue with the rest of the information.
Yep, Mickey Loomis talking out in Indianapolis where the NFL Combine will happen this week. And the reports coming out that Mickey Loomis says that he thinks that Derek Carr is a quarterback that his team can win with. And it's highly likely that Loomis is going to roll with Derek Carr rolling into the 2025 season. Now, my wife hates it, but four of my favorite words in the English language are, I told you so. And Sean and I have told you so.
We have.
Not because of X's and O's. It's less of an X's and O's thing for Sean and I, but a dollar sign thing for Sean and I when it comes to making the salary cap work and getting under that mark without, hurting yourself in the long run. We both felt like keeping Carr was the best option there. Sean, with the news coming out today that that's what the Saints are likely to do, what's your reaction?
All right, let's get into it because I have a reaction, and I'll do my point the laptop at the screen like I generally do. Quite a few notes on this. So Derek Carr is likely to be back. I still think a trade is not completely off the table, but I still think the more realistic thing, or you head into the 2025 season with the idea that Derek Carr is going to be the Saints starting quarterback unless there's some crazy offer that comes to the Saints at some point. That, of course, as you mentioned, according to those that spoke to Mickey Loomis and Indy at the Combine today, Triplett, Underhill, Matthew Paris, Cat Terrell, I believe, was out there, Luke Johnson, and others. Want to make sure I give the proper credit there because we are not there. And I don't like if someone else gets that information and we're using it in a podcast, want to make sure I give proper credit to those who are out there. But I also said to be on the lookout for big-time news. It's going to happen because there's a lot of things happening in Indianapolis. It's not just the guys running and throwing on the field. It really is the bigger story of all the media, front office, coaches, and agents all in one city. It just rarely happens. It happens once or twice a year. So when that happens, a lot of people talk. And Mickey Loomis did some talking today. Don't think it was on camera. I think it was all off camera, but nonetheless, he spoke. And frankly, this is the next biggest item that they had to address, kind of settle this, and then they can move on and attacking the off season. We always told you this news, this exact news, that Derek Carr was likely to be back. That was going to happen. First off, my sincere condolences to a lot of you out there. I know it's a rough day in the anti-Derek Carr section of the fan base.
Especially the Rat Pack.
Saw some of those comments on social media. Just take a breath. You're going to be okay. I don't know if it's the majority of Saints fans or if it's a very loud minority that seem to lose their minds at every turn with anything with Derek Carr. And as you imagine, the news of him coming back or likely to be back, you can imagine how hysterical they were with the Derek Carr news. But there are enough of you out there because you light up the comments section on this pod, so I can only imagine it's the same for other pods when it comes to the Saints. I will also say there are a lot of Derek Carr supporters out there. They found us too. So certainly all are welcome. Anytime I bring this topic up, though, you do get a lot of, man, I don't know if it's triggered is the right word, but man, he elicits a huge response of just like venom. So I hope if you're in that camp, I hope you guys are able to manage. Again, it's going to be okay. It's going to be fine. We're about to enter March. We still got a lot of good things to happen.
Hear me out. There are silver linings.
There's still a lot of things to happen. The truth of the matter is simply this. It is simply this. Once you get past the unhinged section of the fan base and the speculation and the what ifs and everything else, once you get past all of that, you understand. We understood. Those of us that have been around the team truly understood that this was the most realistic move. The Saints had to do it for a lot of reasons. First and foremost, as you mentioned, money, dollar signs. I don't know how many of y'all out there got duped into thinking, got excited into thinking that, oh, wait, whoa, the Saints cut Derek Carr, they can get $30 million in cap space. Let's do it. Oh, that's a no-brainer. Sorry y'all got duped by that. If you would listen to this pod, which I know a lot of y'all do, we kept telling y'all, yes, you get the $30 million, but you don't get it till after June 1st, which means they had to get the estimated $47 million back down to zero without touching Carr's contract by mid-March. I think March 12th is the new league year. And as we tried to do our best, we had the pod a couple of days ago. You've seen me writing all the crazy stuff at my desk. I tried my best to crunch the numbers and truly estimate, just to give a realistic picture of what the Saints would have to do, just how many other things they would have had to do to cut Carr and still get cap compliant. It would have required at least, it's probably underestimating this a little bit, but probably at the very least 16 other moves, with 9 of those moves being restructured, with 4 of those restructures being guys over the age of 30. You just don't want to do that anymore if you're the Saints. Just to go from 47 to 0. Even more, probably 17, 18, 19 moves if you wanted to go from 0 to 8, 9, 10 in cap space, whatever you wanted to do to go out and be below salary cap far enough to where you can sign your draft class and obviously sign some free agents. It just, when you add it all up, guys, it just wasn't worth it financially to do all of that. So if you want to blame anyone in this situation, this is well before Derek Carr. It's the years and years of constant restructures. This is well before, and the extensions of veterans that shouldn't have happened. This was all in play well before, to where you didn't have any wiggle room here. It would have been a massive shift or your roster, a massive amount of moves just to get down to where you needed to be from salary cap compliance. I told you guys that was going to be the likely choice because they just don't have any other realistic choice. Keeping and restructuring Carr, you can get there with just one restructure over the age of 30 and 9 moves. So just do the math. 16 moves, conservatively estimated, versus 9 moves. I think they can get relatively under the cap with a decent amount of cap space with just 9 moves now with the restructure of Derek Carr. And as we tried, like I told you before, with the crunching of the numbers, that's what ended up happening. But to take it one step further, Loomis wants to, in that same report, he said he wants the Saints to be more active than they were in free agency this year. And last year they were open about, and if you look at their moves, the moves actually backed up their words. They weren't as aggressive in free agency. They wanted to get a little more cap compliant, get things going, but yet here they are with the same sort of cap issues. So if that is indeed the case, then they may be taking not just the restructure with Derek Carr, but there's 3 different versions of a restructure that they can do, or 2 different versions, excuse me, They can go get $23 million in cap space, or they can do the big one where you convert base salary and roster bonus and get close to $30 million in cap space if they really want to go out shopping on the open market with Derek Carr and the potential restructuring. So not only do I think they're going to do it, I think there's a strong chance they do the big version of the restructure for Derek Carr. But it is more than just the salary cap, Andre. It really is, because you lose that. That's the main reason. That's the biggest reason. They were forced to do it financially because of years of, call it mismanagement or wrong personnel decisions or bad contracts before. It forced their hand. They had to do it. But it's more than that. There is also the football aspect. I think that football aspect has to be addressed, because I do think there are some things that kind of are out there in the social media, online, fan media landscape, and then there's the what's out there in the football world. Let me definitively say this. I've hinted at this before, but it's a harsh truth to people that don't like him, but it is a truth nonetheless. The perception of Derek Carr in football circles is immensely more positive than the perception of Derek Carr in fan and media circles. Football people genuinely like Derek Carr. They think he's a capable starter, regardless of his lack of success, call it that, throughout his, what is he? Is it going into his 11th year?
Yep.
12th year?
Something like that.
Something like that.
What was the Saints record without him, by the way?
Exactly. I'm going to get to that.
Okay. Do your thing.
So they like Derek Carr a whole lot more than the emotional fans and really the media outside of the team, outside of us covering the team, truly do. Right now, plus the hysterics in the actual play, the hysterics of the reaction to Derek Carr and the actual play do not match, especially when you look at what he's done here. 68% completion percentage over 2 years, 40 touchdowns. Do I have this right? 13 interceptions in 27 games. I averaged out the rating of 99, average QBR of 60. I'm not trying to convince you guys. Y'all understand what stats are. You keep it in its proper lane. And I know, and this is where I'll give the Carr haters a little bit of credibility here. He is not elite. He is not an elite quarterback. He's not. And 14-13 as a starter isn't nearly good enough. The Saints want him to be the guy when they brought him in. They wanted him. They still clearly want him to be the guy that brings them back to the playoffs. And it just hasn't happened in a very attainable division. Part of that, a big part of that, is on number 4, Derek Carr. It's also true, and this is what I was alluding to earlier, this team has collapsed when he hasn't played. Not just not won, they have collapsed. But barely being over 500 truly sucks. It is also true. It's a lot better than being 1-11. Really 0-7 when you talk about the games that he has actually not started. Now, I'm adding the 3 games he exited last year and the 2 he exited this year to the games without Derek Carr. Only win was against the lowly Giants, and he left 2 minutes or 3 minutes left in that game.
3 minutes left in the game.
They've literally not won a game, a single game he did not start in 2 seasons. And I don't have the math in my head. You may have it. The average margin of victory in the games this year was awful, which is frankly, now look, they didn't win a game he didn't start in 2 seasons, but that is my biggest knock on Derek Carr, is how much he's missed in 2 seasons. As we mentioned several times, durability has been an issue for a guy that had no durability issues before he got to New Orleans. Hopefully that changes. But maybe that's what some of y'all want. We were talking about this in the sports office. Maybe that's what some of y'all want. Hey, let's go 2-15, be in line for the top pick next year. And look, I get it. It's not a bad logic. And if they chose to go that route, I'd be okay with it. I really would. But that's more our logic. That's more fans, media logic. It's very hard for football teams to enter a season with the expectation of not trying to win. If it happens, it happens. But it's rare, not just the Saints, but any football team, that they go into a season thinking that, you know what? Let's just be bad this year because next year's draft is supposed to be better. You just don't see it that often because the draft is such a crapshoot, and there are a lot of guys going into a different stages of their careers. And look, when you have a general manager who's probably, 68, 69 years old, they can't afford to just give up on seasons.
Or again, roster.
Again, I wouldn't have a problem with if the Saints decided to do that, but they're not going to do it, and I knew they weren't going to do that. So as of now, the Saints roll forward with Derek Carr. Unless there's the Godfather offer, the offer the Saints can't refuse. Next step will be a massive restructure for Carr. Then I'll look for them to restructure the contracts of Eric McCoy, Cesar Ruiz, Carl Granderson, and possibly Pete Werner. And they're likely going to cut a few guys like Cedric Wilson, maybe Jamal Williams, and a few others. But they move forward with Derek Carr. And the next big decision, honestly, big decision, it's going to get a lot of headlines. Eventually, very soon, they make a decision on Taysom Hill and Cam Jordan. What say you?
You know, you mentioned that 14-13 is better than 1-11, and I think that's the disconnect with the fan base is because the fan base, and you touched on it at the end, I think the fan base would rather 1-11.
I think you're right.
Honestly,
Yeah.
As a fan, the worst thing that you can be is average. If you're good to great, you're in the playoffs, you're contending.
That's it.
If you're bad, at least it's like, okay, we're getting good draft picks, we're building something for the future. When you're average, you're not good enough to be in the playoffs, even in a sorry division, which the NFC South has been recently. But you're not bad enough to be able to draft the Jaden Danielses and the Caleb Williams and the talented quarterbacks that are coming into the draft every year. You're average. You're good enough to be in the middle of the draft. And the middle of the draft is not a place where the Saints have succeeded lately if you look at the history of the draft picks that they have made over the last, 7 years? Mm-hmm. So, that's probably the biggest issue with the fan base. It's not that Derek Carr is a bad quarterback, but it's that he's an average quarterback, which takes me to Mickey's, the report about what Mickey said is that, we can win games with Derek Carr. First thought I had was, well, how many? I mean, in that case, yeah, you can win games with Derek Carr, like maybe 5 or 6 of them, maybe 7 or 8 of them if you're having a good year. But win playoff games with Derek Carr? I don't think that's necessarily the case. This is not a roster built to win right now. Whether you have Derek Carr at quarterback, whether you have Spencer Rattler at quarterback, I know it hurts a lot of people to hear, but Spencer Rattler is not going to step on this team and win 12 games after going 0 for 7 in games he played last year. And yes, there were injuries. Carr dealt with injuries too. Everybody who played with the Saints last year dealt with injuries because they were the most injury-riddled roster in the NFL. This is not a roster built to win with anybody at quarterback. The harsh truth about the Saints is that this is a team that should be focused on killing time until they get their next quarterback. The next 2 years are not about contending. The next 2 years are not about playoffs. The next 2 years are not about necessarily winning games. It's about getting to a point where you can focus on those things, because right now, having to start the offseason and clear $50+ million, imagine a place that most other teams are in where you start the offseason and you're like, oh, we have cap room to start off, and we're still going to do restructures and everything, but we're 23 under the cap instead of 54 over the cap. That's what, to me, the Saints should be focused on in the next couple of years, is making the moves now to where they can be cap compliant in the future, getting into a position where they can draft that franchise quarterback, because I've said it many times throughout the season, that franchise quarterback is not on this roster to me. So right now, the Saints bringing back Derek Carr, it's not a huge surprise. Financially, it was the best decision that they can make. I understand why it upsets the fan base, because Derek Carr is probably not going to win you any playoff games in 2025. And if Derek Carr plays how he did last year, he's probably not going to get you the number 1 overall draft pick either. Because as much as the Saints fans dislike Derek Carr, they can't call him a bad quarterback, because if he was a bad quarterback, he wouldn't be 14-13 as a starter. He's just good enough to give you a chance, but not good enough to take you over the hump. And I think that's where a lot of the frustration comes when it comes to Carr. But it seems like he will be back in black and gold next year.
Well, they had no other choice. And look, let me just say this. If they weren't 50 over the cap and it was like 20, I could see him moving on from them.
Probably could cut him.
They probably could. If they weren't 47 over the cap and they were, heck, even like 30, I think they could. But to have to do 16 moves, again, that's an estimate, probably more, to have any reasonable expectation of getting under the salary cap far enough to have any sort of chance to sign anyone. You couldn't do that while also being aggressive in free agency. You couldn't do that while also, not robbing Peter to pay Paul, because while you're getting one contract off, you're adding all these other ones on. And we've said this repeatedly. It's more the approach to how they've been dealing with contracts and salary cap and financials, because we're seeing this. Because this is the same thing every year. Once you go down that road, you just got to keep doing it. You got to keep doing it. You got to keep doing it. You got to keep doing it. So, let me just also say for those that are mad right now, this started well before Derek Carr. And let me also agree with you out there. If Derek Carr with this exact same resume was coming into the offseason, the Saints had close to any salary cap space or just a little bit over, I think he would be gone. But he's not. And so they're going to roll with him. I think there is a respect from Kellen Moore to Derek Carr. I do think there's a respect there. I think they understand. They're pretty close. I think there's only 2 years apart, if I'm not mistaken. And I do think there's some things, especially since Kellen Moore has shown he can be kind of all right, I got this kind of quarterback, I can do this. I got this kind of quarterback, I can do that. I got that kind of quarterback, I can do this. And he'll do the same with Derek Carr. And there's also, while it might be the plan to start the season with Derek Carr, it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to finish the season because, if it's not your guy, he's not your guy. I mean, look what happened in Denver with Russell Wilson and the former Saints head coach. I mean, by week, 12, 13 of that season, they had obviously moved on. So that could certainly happen. But it didn't shock me that, A, they kept him, and B, that Loomis was going to say, yeah, we prepared, we're still trying to win. We're going to be, I didn't think he'd say we're going to be very active in free agency. But there is still that belief that they can win the NFC South. And I don't know. I guess there's still a chance because it's still weak, but that's just their plan of attack going forward.
I mean, yeah, the Bucs have pretty much dominated this division when you look at the recent years. The Panthers got better at the end of last year. The Falcons, we'll see where they go with Michael Penix, those three all have their starting quarterbacks lined up. And a question you and I were talking about, speaking of starting quarterbacks, if Derek Carr wasn't here, how many teams across the league do you think Derek Carr could start?
Well, and I think this dictated his pretty strong stance of I'm not taking a pay cut, because you're only as good as the market. You're only as good as what someone else would be willing to pay you. So if you're not taking a pay cut, I'm going to force them to cut me, and then I probably would have a market somewhere else. I don't know if he would get close to what he made with the Saints. In fact, I know he wouldn't, but I do think he would have a spot somewhere else in the NFL, and it's not the case for every Saints player, a starting spot in the NFL. Realistically, I think he could start for the Colts. It sounds like they're kind of open competition. Sounds like Richardson's a guy they're not in love with anymore.
I mean, Joe Flacco was starting games last year.
Cleveland Browns, ironically, because Deshaun Watson, the guy they wanted before Derek Carr. I think you can start for the Giants, the Jets, the Titans. I think you can start for his old team, the Raiders.
Yeah.
There are a couple wild cards. I mean, he probably could start for the Panthers, but I'm going to give the nod to Bryce Young because he's playing a little bit better, and that's their future. I mean, could he start for the Cardinals or something? I don't know. It depends on how you view
question mark next to the Rams. Maybe because they've got the whole Stafford thing going on.
My point is, with a weak draft, and there's going to be some names on the market if Stafford gets traded, Aaron Rodgers obviously, and now if in this hypothetical situation it could have been Carr, Sam Darnold. I do think there would be a market for those veteran free agents. So I think he obviously knew that, and that was part of the why he was so bold about suggesting he was not going to take a pay cut, because I do think he's starting somewhere in 2025, and it looks like right now the Saints have no choice. And again, this predates Derek Carr. They're going to have to roll with Derek Carr in 2025 unless a trade offer comes.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, at the end of the day, Carr is your quarterback. That's who you're stuck with. Some view it as stuck. Some view it as we're going to roll forward with this guy. Now I'm curious to see how Carr kind of meshes with this new coaching staff, because, a lot of talk was made Super Bowl week when Kellen Moore arrived, and Derek Carr was not one of the first ones in the building to shake Moore's hand. Really, he wasn't around the city of New Orleans at all during Super Bowl week, and a lot of criticism has kind of come his way because of that. Is it fair criticism?
I don't know what to make of that. I really don't. Again, he's in a little bit of a,
darned if you do,
darned if you don't type situation, because if he would have been here, he would have been asked relentlessly about his future with the Saints. But also, a lot of those guys, I mean, they come here, especially like we won Radio Row. All those guys were promoting something usually with a brand or some kind of thing they were doing. And maybe he doesn't have any of those things lined up. I don't know what to make of it. Maybe he just needed a break from this place for a while because of the attention he received. I didn't think it was all that big a deal. I know a lot of people took it and ran with it. But if they're running it back with him in 2025, clearly it didn't make a big deal to the Saints. It wasn't a big deal to the Saints either.
Yeah, I think it would have been a good look for him to be there when Kellen Moore got hired. Super Bowl week, I don't really care about that.
I agree with that.
When Kellen Moore gets hired and you watch the video of him walking in and everyone's clapping, and the first hand he shakes was Eric McCoy. Derek Carr probably should have been there if that's the starting quarterback, and this is the new offensive coach. That's going to be your best friend. Your work friend going forward. I think Derek Carr should have been there for that. Now, as for Super Bowl week, some people I've seen have criticized him for not being a part of Mardi Gras. Look, I mean, the way y'all act about Derek Carr, they would boo him off a float.
Yeah, so they mocked him all last year.
Yeah, so I don't care about Mardi Gras. I don't care about Super Bowl week, but I think he should have been here for Kellen Moore.
Yeah, that would have been interesting with the Kellen Moore situation. And he's kind of been pretty outspoken about moving his family to Fresno, which is not uncommon to have for guys to be in a different state when it's not football season. I mean, Drew lived in California the whole time he was here. About halfway through, his family spent a lot of time in California too. So I think the Mario Davis lives in Nashville in the offseason. So I don't know. So all those things were kind of things were talked about, but in the end, it looks like they're rolling with Derek Carr in 2025. I don't have huge expectations for him. I really don't. Hope it works out, but I think this was always going to be the likely scenario for the Saints and Kellen Moore, and then eventually Kellen Moore will either like it or not like it and want to get his own quarterback in here. So we'll see. All right, for Andre Johnson Jr., I am Sean Fazende, but we'll catch you guys next time on Overtime.